The portrait shattered against the marble floor of Cináed's throne room, and his son's scream tore through the silence like a blade through silk. "She's not in this. Where is she? Where's Mama?" The Alpha King's smile died on his lips. He'd been staring at the painting, himself, his new bride Líadan of House Fianpar, and little Ronan between them, all rendered in gold leaf and crushing perfection. Family. Future. Everything the royal decree demanded. Everything except the truth. His pup stood trembling, 5 years old and already understanding betrayal. The child's wolf eyes, not yet his own, still carrying the amber of his mother, blazed with a rage that shouldn't exist in someone so small. Glass glittered around bare feet. Blood welled up drop by drop. "Ronan, you promised." The boy's voice cracked. "You took the blood oath. You said Mama would always be yours." Pack law stated clearly. An Alpha King could only bind himself once. One mate. One bond. One blood oath sworn beneath the full moon. Cináed had sworn his to Sadhbh, Sadhbh of the forbidden bloodline. Sadhbh whose name was now illegal to speak within castle walls. Sadhbh who'd been ripped from his arms 3 months ago when the council discovered what she was. What their son was. And now this portrait hung in the Great Hall, announcing to the kingdom that King Cináed had moved on. That he'd accepted the arranged marriage. That Líadan of House Fianpar, pure-blooded and council-approved, was his true mate. The lie was exquisite. The lie was necessary. The lie was killing him. "Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what happens next will break you the way it broke him." 3 years earlier, Cináed had met Sadhbh in the Whispering Woods, where the borders between the wolf kingdoms blurred into something wild and ungoverned. She'd been gathering moon petals, illegal flowers that only bloomed for those carrying ancient magic in their blood. He'd been hunting alone, trying to escape the suffocating weight of his father's expectations. She'd looked up at him with eyes like molten gold, and his wolf had known. Not recognized. Not accepted. Known. The way you know your own heartbeat. The way you know the difference between breathing and drowning. "You're trespassing," she'd said, no fear in her voice despite facing down the crown prince in his shifted form. He'd changed back to human, standing naked in the moonlight, and said, "So are you." Her laugh had been music. "I was born in these woods. You're the interloper, princeling." "Cináed," he'd corrected. "My name is Cináed. I know who you are." She'd tucked a moon petal behind her ear. "Everyone knows the heir to the northern throne. The last of the Riordan line. The wolf who'll unite the kingdoms." Her smile had been sad. "Or destroy them." He'd stepped closer. His wolf had been screaming, clawing, begging. "And you are someone you should forget you ever met." But forgetting Sadhbh was like forgetting how to breathe. He'd returned every night for a month. She'd been there each time, waiting, gathering her illegal flowers. They'd talked until dawn, about pack law, about the crushing weight of legacy, about the space between duty and desire. She'd told him stories about the old ways, before the council had seized power, when wolves ran free and mated for love rather than political advantage. She'd never told him her family name. On the 31st night, beneath a blood moon, he'd kissed her. And his wolf had surged forward, marking her before he could stop it. The bite that sealed a bond deeper than marriage, stronger than death. The blood oath that made her his in every way that mattered. She'd gasped against his mouth, her own wolf rising to meet his. The magic that flared between them had been wrong. Too bright, too ancient, tasting of powers that hadn't walked the kingdoms in 300 years. "What are you?" he'd whispered against her throat. "Yours," she'd whispered back. "For however long they let me be." 6 months later, she'd told him she was pregnant. 6 months after that, his father had died, and Cináed had become king. And 3 months ago, the council had discovered the truth. Sadhbh was a descendant of the Banished Lines. The bloodlines that had been purged 2 centuries earlier for carrying magic too dangerous to control. Magic that could challenge the council's authority. Magic that could wake the old gods. Magic that was now running through his son's veins. They'd taken her in the night. 20 council guards, silver chains, cold iron. Ronan had screamed himself hoarse. Cináed had killed 4 guards before they'd subdued him with enough poison to down an elephant. When he'd woken, Sadhbh was gone. And the royal decree was waiting on his desk. By order of the High Council, King Cináed of House Riordan will dissolve his unlawful bond and accept a sanctioned mate within 1 lunar cycle. Failure to comply will result in abdication and execution. The child of the Forbidden Union will be evaluated for corruption. Evaluated. As if his son was a piece of meat. Líadan had arrived 2 weeks later, beautiful and cold, carrying the weight of 5 noble houses behind her. The council's choice. The perfect queen. "I know you don't love me," she'd said during their first private meeting. Her voice had been surprisingly gentle. "I know this is political. But I'll be kind to your son. I'll never try to replace her." He'd wanted to hate her. She'd made it impossible. The wedding had been yesterday. He'd spoken the vows with Sadhbh's name carved into his heart. He'd placed the crown on Líadan's head while imagining it was Sadhbh's dark curls beneath the silver. He'd smiled for the kingdom while dying inside. And this morning the portrait had been delivered. Ronan had taken one look at it and known. Children always know. "Clean this up," Cináed ordered the servants, his voice raw. He knelt beside his son, trying to lift the boy. "Ronan, you're bleeding. Don't touch me." The pup scrambled backward, leaving bloody footprints on white marble. "You're a liar. You said the blood oath was forever. You said mates were sacred. They are. Then where is she? Where's Mama?" The servants had frozen, clearly unsure whether to stay or flee. Cináed could feel their stares, their judgment. By tomorrow, every wolf in the kingdom would know the king's son had rejected the new queen. That the child of the forbidden bloodline had called his father a liar in front of witnesses. The council would hear about this within the hour. "Ronan." He kept his voice level, alpha command bleeding through despite his intentions. "Your mother is dead." The boy's voice broke. "Did you kill her? Did you kill Mama so you could have her?" The accusation hit like a silver bullet to the chest. "No." Cináed's hands were shaking. "No, I would never." "Then bring her back." Ronan was crying now. His small body racked with sobs. "Use your alpha power. Make them give her back. If only it were that simple. If only alpha power could override the council. If only loving someone was enough to keep them safe." "I can't," Cináed whispered. The admission tasted like ash. "I'm sorry. I can't." "Then you're not a real alpha." Ronan's words were quiet now, devastatingly calm. Real alphas protect their mates. Real alphas don't break blood oaths. "Mama told me. Your mother said you were the strongest wolf she'd ever met. Said you'd burn down kingdoms for her." The boy's amber eyes, Sadhbh's eyes, met his. "She was wrong." The words carved through him like claws through flesh. Before Cináed could respond, footsteps echoed through the throne room. Heavy, deliberate, multiple sets. The council had arrived. 7 wolves entered in formal robes, led by Cathal of House O'Dondapane, the High Counselor, the wolf who'd ordered Sadhbh's arrest. He was ancient, powerful, and absolutely merciless when it came to protecting what he called pack purity. "Your Majesty." Cathal's voice dripped with false courtesy. "We heard there was a disturbance." Cináed rose slowly, positioning himself between the council and his son. "A child's tantrum. Nothing more. A child who destroyed a royal portrait. A child who publicly rejected his queen." Cathal's gaze slid to Ronan. "A child whose corruption appears to be accelerating. He's 5 years old. He's the spawn of a forbidden bloodline." Cathal moved closer, and Cináed's wolf snarled in warning. "We've been patient, Your Majesty. We allowed you to keep the boy when protocol demanded his immediate execution. We gave you time to adjust. But this display shows that the child is unstable. Dangerous. He's grieving. He's contaminated. Another counselor spoke up, Murianne of House O'Seeley, a woman whose hatred for the Banished Lines was legendary. The taint in his blood is manifesting. Today he breaks a portrait. Tomorrow what? Will he attack the queen? Will he murder nobles in their sleep? Will he wake the forbidden magic? He's a child. He's an abomination. Cathal's words fell like stones. And pack law is clear. Offspring of forbidden unions must be purged before they reach their first shift. He's running out of time, Your Majesty. As are you. The threat was unmistakable. Comply or lose everything. Cináed's wolf was howling for blood. His hands itched to shift, to rip out throats, to show these ancient bastards what a real alpha could do. But Ronan was standing behind him, small and vulnerable and bleeding. And Cináed had learned long ago that rage was a luxury kings couldn't afford. The boy will be disciplined, he said carefully. He'll apologize to Queen Líadan. This won't happen again. See that it doesn't. Cathal turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Your Majesty. We have news about the prisoner. Cináed's heart stopped. What news? Sadhbh of the Banished Lines attempted escape last night. The guards were forced to use extreme measures to subdue her. Cathal's smile was cruel. She's alive. Barely. The healers say she'll recover. Eventually. The world tilted. They'd hurt her. They'd hurt her, and there was nothing he could do. Nothing that wouldn't result in civil war. Nothing that wouldn't get Ronan killed. May I see her? Absolutely not. She's being held in an undisclosed location for her own protection. And yours. Cathal's eyes glittered. After all, we wouldn't want you to do something inadvisable. Like trying to rescue a condemned prisoner. Like breaking your own laws for a woman who was never truly your mate. The blood oath on Cináed's wrist burned. Liar. They were all liars. But he was the biggest liar of all, standing here pretending he had a choice. Of course, he said. Thank you for the update. The council filed out, their judgment hanging in the air like smoke. When they were gone, Cináed turned back to his son. Ronan was staring at him with something worse than anger. Disappointment. You're not even going to try, are you? The boy whispered. Ronan. You're going to let them keep her. You're going to pretend that lady is our family now. You're going to forget Mama ever existed. I could never forget your mother. But you won't save her. Ronan's voice was dead. Me. You'll just let her die in some prison while you play king with your new wife. The accusation was so accurate it drew blood. If I move against the council, they'll kill you both, Cináed said quietly. Is that what you want? For your mother to watch you die before they execute her? Maybe dying would be better than this. The words hit like a punch to the gut. 5 years old and already talking about death. What had he done to his son? What had he failed to protect him from? Go to your room, Cináed said, his voice rough. The healers will tend your feet. We'll talk later. There's nothing to talk about. Ronan walked away, leaving bloody footprints across pristine marble. You already made your choice. The throne room fell silent. Cináed stood alone, surrounded by broken glass and shattered futures, and wondered how many more pieces of himself he'd have to sacrifice before this nightmare ended. The portrait of his new family stared up at him from the floor. Líadan looked serene. Ronan looked happy. He looked like a king. All of it was a lie. Queen Líadan found him hours later in the war room, staring at maps he wasn't seeing. The servants told me what happened, she said softly. She didn't come closer, respecting the dangerous energy rolling off him in waves. I'm sorry. For what? You didn't break the portrait. No. But I'm the reason it was painted. She moved to the window, gazing out at the kingdom spread below them. I knew this would be difficult. I didn't realize it would be this. Cináed laughed, the sound bitter. What did you expect? That my son would happily accept a replacement mother 3 months after his real one was imprisoned? No. Líadan's voice was steady. I expected exactly this. Just hope. I don't know. That maybe time would help. Time won't help. Nothing will help. Not while she's rotting in some council dungeon. Líadan was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her words were careful. Do you know where they're keeping her? No. That information is above even a king's clearance, apparently. And if you did know, what would you do? It was a dangerous question. Potentially a trap. Cináed studied his new wife. His false mate, his political shackle. She was beautiful in an ice-cold way, with silver blonde hair and eyes like winter frost. Everything about her screamed noble breeding, careful cultivation, perfect control. She was nothing like Sadhbh. Sadhbh had been wild, fierce, all fire and fury and untamed magic. Sadhbh had been his. Why do you want to know? He asked. Líadan turned from the window. Because I'm not blind, Your Majesty. I see how you look at that child, like he's the only thing keeping you alive. I see how you avoid touching me even in public. I see how you still wear your blood oath mark like a brand. She gestured to his wrist, where Sadhbh's name was carved in ancient script, visible only to other wolves. You're dying by inches. And a dead king serves no one. The council is afraid, she interrupted. Why else would they move so aggressively against one woman? Why else would they demand you take a new mate within weeks instead of the traditional mourning year? She stepped closer. They're terrified of her. Of what she represents. She's from a banished line. Of course they're afraid. No. Líadan's voice dropped. They're afraid of what she could do. What her bloodline could wake. I've been doing research, Your Majesty. The banished lines weren't purged because they were evil. They were purged because they were powerful. Because they could challenge the council's control. Cináed's wolf perked up, suddenly very interested. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe the council has been lying for 200 years. Maybe the banished lines weren't monsters. Maybe they were just inconvenient. It was treason to even suggest it. It was also everything Cináed had suspected for months. Even if that's true, he said slowly, it doesn't change anything. The council has the power. The armies. The support of the noble houses. Going against them would mean civil war. Perhaps. Líadan's smile was cold. Or perhaps it would mean revolution. Before Cináed could respond, the door burst open. Ronan's nursemaid stood there, pale and trembling. Your Majesty, the boy he's. Cináed was moving before she finished. His wolf taking over, carrying him through corridors at inhuman speed. He could smell it now. The sharp tang of magic, the crackling ozone that meant power was manifesting. His son's power. The forbidden power. He reached Ronan's chambers to find the door blown off its hinges. Inside the room was chaos. Furniture floated in midair. The windows had shattered outward. And in the center of it all, Ronan stood with his eyes blazing pure gold. Not amber, not brown, but the molten gold of ancient magic. The magic that hadn't been seen in 2 centuries. The magic that proved the council's worst fears. Ronan. Cináed kept his voice calm, approaching slowly. Can you hear me? The boy's head turned, but there was no recognition in those burning eyes. She's calling, he whispered. Can't you hear her? She's calling for help. I slid down Cináed's spine. Who's calling? Mama. She's scared. They're hurting her. The magic flared brighter, and cracks spider-webbed across the walls. She needs us. Why aren't we helping her? Ronan, you need to calm down. No. The word came out as a roar, and the magical pressure in the room doubled. I won't calm down. I won't pretend everything's okay. She's our mate and they're torturing her and you're just standing there. The blood oath on Cináed's wrist suddenly flared with heat. For one impossible moment, he felt it. Sadhbh's pain, her terror, her desperate hope that he'd come for her. The bond wasn't broken. It had never been broken. The council had lied about that too. I can feel her, Ronan gasped, tears streaming down his glowing cheeks. The bond shows me. They have her underground. In the old dungeons beneath the council hall. They're using iron and silver and cold magic. They're trying to break her. But she won't break. She keeps thinking about us. Cináed's wolf howled. The old dungeons. He knew where those were. Had explored them as a child, before his father declared them off-limits. Had memorized the tunnels, the secret passages, the ways in and out. He could get to her. He could save her. And in doing so, he'd start a war that would destroy the kingdom. Ronan, he said carefully. I need you to listen to me. Why? So you can tell me more lies. The boy's power pulsed. I know what you're thinking. I can feel it through the bond. You're choosing the kingdom over her. Over us. Again. That's not. It is. Ronan screamed and the ceiling cracked. You always choose duty. You always choose what's right instead of what's true. And Mama's paying the price. The magic exploded outward. Cináed threw himself forward, wrapping his son in his arms, pouring his own alpha power into the bond between them. The collision of energy was catastrophic. Ancient magic meeting alpha dominance, forbidden power meeting royal bloodline. The room detonated. When the smoke cleared, they were both lying in rubble. Ronan had passed out. The golden glow faded from his eyes. But the damage was done. The entire west wing of the castle had been destroyed. And standing in the doorway, surrounded by council guards, was Cathal. Well, the High Counselor said softly. I'd say that confirms our concerns about corruption, wouldn't you? They took Ronan. Cináed fought. Of course he fought. He shifted fully, his massive wolf form tearing through council guards like paper. He killed 3 before they brought him down with silver nets and poison darts. He kept fighting even as his vision blurred, even as his wolf form faltered, even as human consciousness reasserted itself. He fought until his son was gone. When he woke, he was chained in his own throne room. The council stood before him in formal judgment formation. Behind them, the noble houses had gathered. Dozens of wolves, all watching with hungry eyes. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked eager. They'd been waiting for this. For the moment the king showed weakness. For the excuse to take his power. Líadan stood off to the side, her face carefully neutral. She caught his eye briefly, and something passed between them. A warning. Promise. He couldn't tell. King Cináed of House Riordan, Cathal intoned. You stand accused of harboring a corrupted bloodline, of allowing forbidden magic to manifest under your roof, and of failing to protect your kingdom from supernatural threat. How do you answer these charges? Where is my son? Cináed's voice was a growl. The child is being evaluated. He's 5 years old. He destroyed an entire wing of the royal castle. Mirian stepped forward. He manifested powers that haven't been seen since the purge. He is a walking catastrophe, and you've done nothing to control him. Because there's nothing to control. He's a child who misses his mother. His mother is a criminal, Cathal said coldly. A descendant of traitors. A carrier of corrupted blood. She should have been executed the moment we discovered what she was. Then why wasn't she? Cináed snarled. Why keep her alive? Why lock her away instead of killing her? What are you afraid of? The question hung in the air. Cathal's expression flickered. Just for a moment, but it was enough. They were afraid. Líadan had been right. The prisoner is being kept alive for research purposes, Cathal said finally. Her bloodline contains genetic markers we need to understand. Once we've extracted what we need, she'll be disposed of humanely. Research. Cináed's laugh was broken. You're torturing her for research. We're protecting the kingdom. You're protecting your power. He lurched against his chains. The Banished Lines were never evil. They were just stronger than you. And you couldn't stand the idea of wolves you couldn't control. Careful, Your Majesty. Cathal's voice was pure ice. You're dangerously close to treason. I crossed into treason the moment I swore a blood oath to Sadhbh. We both know it. The only question is whether you have the balls to execute a sitting king. Silence. The noble houses shifted nervously. Executing a king would require a full council vote and support from at least 3 of the 5 major houses. It was possible but messy. The kind of mess that could destabilize the entire kingdom. We don't want to execute you, Miriam said carefully. We want you to see reason. The child must be put down before his corruption spreads. The prisoner must be eliminated. And you must commit fully to your sanctioned mate and produce legitimate heirs. Legitimate? Cináed's voice was hollow. As if my son isn't legitimate. As if the blood oath means nothing. It means everything, Cathal said. Which is why it must be severed. It can't be severed. Blood oaths are eternal. Not if one party is dead. The words fell like an axe. Cináed went very still. What did you just say? If Sadhbh of the Banished Lines were to die, the blood oath would dissolve. You'd be free to bond properly with Queen Líadan. Your son would lose his connection to the forbidden magic. Everything would be resolved. You're going to kill her. We're going to do what's necessary. Rage exploded through Cináed like wildfire. The chains groaned as he strained against them. His wolf howling for release. If you touch her, I will rip this kingdom apart stone by stone. I will burn every council hall. I will hunt each of you to the ends of the earth. No, Cathal said calmly. You won't. Because we have your son. The world stopped. If you make one move against the council, the boy dies. If you attempt a rescue, the boy dies. If you refuse to cooperate with the bonding severance, the boy dies. Cathal smiled. You're trapped, Your Majesty. And deep down you know it. You can have your mate or your son. Not both. Choose. It was the choice that had been haunting him since the beginning. The impossible choice. Save Sadhbh and Ronan dies. Save Ronan and Sadhbh dies. There was no third option. There was no winning. How long? Cináed's voice cracked. How long do I have? The execution is scheduled for 3 days from now. Dawn. You're welcome to attend, though we don't recommend it. Watching one's blood oath severed is apparently unpleasant. 3 days. 72 hours. And then Sadhbh would be gone, and part of him would die with her, and he'd be left to raise their son alone while pretending to love a woman he barely knew. May I see her? He whispered. Before. May I say goodbye? No. Cathal's voice held no mercy. That privilege was forfeited when you chose treason. The chains were removed. The council filed out. The noble houses dispersed, already gossiping about the king's public humiliation. Líadan remained. She approached slowly, and for the first time since their wedding, she touched him, just her hand on his shoulder, light and careful. I'm sorry, she said. Why? You're getting what you wanted. A king who actually acts like your mate. That's not what I wanted. Her voice was sad. I wanted to help. I wanted to give you a way out. I failed. Cináed looked up at her. This ice-cold queen who'd been forced into his life. Why do you even care? Because I know what it's like to love someone you can't have, she said softly. And I know what the council is capable of when that love threatens their control. She squeezed his shoulder once, then let go. 3 days isn't much time. But it's not 0. Use it wisely. She walked away, leaving him alone in his throne room. Alone with his impossible choice. Alone with his breaking heart. The blood oath on his wrist pulsed. Still alive, still connected, still binding him to a woman he couldn't save. Sadhbh, he thought desperately. Sorry. I'm so sorry. And somewhere deep underground, in a cell lined with cold iron, Sadhbh of the Banished Lines felt his anguish through the bond. And wept. Day 1 after the council's ultimatum. And Cináed couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't think about anything except Sadhbh in her cell and Ronan in whatever evaluation chamber the council had locked him in. He tried everything. Called in favors from sympathetic nobles. None would risk the council's wrath. Attempted to locate his son through pack bonds. They'd blocked it somehow, cold iron and dark magic severing his connection. Even considered gathering his personal guards and staging a raid on the council hall. But every plan ended the same way, with Ronan's throat slit and Sadhbh executed in retaliation. He was checkmated. Completely and utterly trapped. Líadan found him in the war room again, still staring at maps that held no answers. "You're planning something stupid," she observed. "I'm planning something necessary. Those are often the same thing." She moved to stand beside him. "The council has guards watching your every move. You won't make it 10 feet before they stop you. Then I'll die trying. And your son will die for certain. Your mate will die. And the kingdom will fall into chaos." Líadan's voice was sharp. "Is that really what you want? To destroy everything out of pride? It's not about pride." He slammed his fist on the table. "It's about not being a coward. About not letting the woman I love die while I stand here wringing my hands. Then don't stand here." Líadan's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Move." He looked at her sharply. "What?" She pulled a piece of parchment from her robes, old and yellowed. "This is a blueprint of the old dungeons. My family helped build them centuries ago. There are passages the council doesn't know about." She pointed to a thin line on the map. "Here. A tunnel that leads from the catacombs beneath the chapel to the holding cells. It's narrow, dangerous, and almost certainly trapped. But it exists." Cináed's heart was suddenly pounding. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I told you. I know what it's like to love someone you can't have." Her smile was bitter. "Before they selected me for this marriage, I had someone. His name was Fiachra. He was a warrior, lower born, completely inappropriate for a noble daughter." She touched the map gently. "The council found out. They gave me the same choice you're facing now. Marry you or watch him die." "What happened to him?" "I married you." Her voice broke. "And they killed him anyway. Said he was a loose end. A potential complication." Tears glittered in her ice-blue eyes. "They made me watch. Said it would teach me about loyalty." Silence stretched between them. "I'm sorry," Cináed said finally. "Don't be. Be smart." She pressed the map into his hands. "Save her. Save your son. And then burn the council to the ground. For both of us. If I do this, you'll be implicated. They'll know you helped. Let them." Líadan's smile was as cold as winter. "I'm tired of being their puppet. Tired of pretending their authority is legitimate. If you're starting a revolution, Your Majesty, consider me your first recruit." She left before he could respond. Cináed stared at the map, his mind racing. It was insane. The tunnel would be trapped, guarded, or possibly collapsed. Even if he made it through, he'd have to break Sadhbh out, retrieve Ronan from wherever they were keeping him, and escape the most heavily fortified building in the kingdom. The odds of success were essentially zero. But zero wasn't the same as impossible. And doing nothing was definitely impossible. He spent the next 6 hours preparing, gathering supplies, choosing which guards he could trust, pitifully few, writing letters to be delivered if he failed. One to Ronan explaining everything, one to Líadan thanking her, one to the kingdom, apologizing for what he was about to do. At midnight he made his move. The chapel was empty at this hour, dark and cold. He found the entrance to the catacombs behind the altar, hidden by a stone that only moved when you pressed the wolf's head carved into the wall. The tunnel beyond was exactly as ancient as Líadan had warned, crumbling, water-damaged, smelling of decay. He shifted partially, letting his wolf senses guide him through the darkness. The first trap was a pitfall, barely visible in the dim light. He avoided it. The second was a pressure plate that would have released poison gas. He stepped over it. The third was more sophisticated, a magical ward that would have alerted the council the moment he passed through. He'd brought a counter ward, carved into a stone by a witch he'd once saved from execution. It crackled and sparked, but held. He was through. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, and he could hear it now. Breathing, heartbeats, the small sounds of prisoners in cells. There were at least 20 holding chambers down here, all occupied. The council kept more secrets than he'd imagined. He followed the blood oath bond, letting it pull him toward Sadhbh like a compass needle pointing north, left, right, down a spiral staircase that descended into deeper darkness. The air grew colder, heavier, tasting of despair and forgotten magic. And then he saw her. Sadhbh was chained to a wall in a cell barely large enough to stand in. Silver manacles on her wrists and ankles. Cold iron collar around her throat. She was thinner than he remembered, pale and shaking but alive. So impossibly alive. Her head lifted as he approached, and her eyes, those golden eyes that had captured him 3 years ago, widened in disbelief. Cináed. Her voice was a broken whisper. You're not real. You're another trick. Another test. I'm real. He was at the bars now. His hands gripping the cold iron despite the burn. Sadhbh, I'm real. I'm here. You can't be here. Tears spilled down her cheeks. They'll kill you. They'll kill Ronan. You have to go. I'm not leaving without you. You have to. She lunged forward as far as her chains would allow. Cináed, please. They're watching. They're always watching. This is a trap. They knew you'd come. They've been waiting. The lights blazed on. Cathal stepped out of the shadows, flanked by 20 council guards. His smile was triumphant. Your Majesty. How predictable. Cináed's wolf snarled, ready to shift, ready to fight. But Cathal held up one hand, and a guard dragged someone else into the light. Ronan. His son was unconscious, limp in the guard's arms, a silver blade pressed to his small throat. One move, Cathal said pleasantly, and the child bleeds out before you can reach him. Do we understand each other? The world narrowed to that blade, that throat, that impossible choice made real. Cináed's hands slowly unclenched from the bars. Let him go. Oh, we will. After you make your decision. Cathal circled closer. You see, Your Majesty, we knew you'd attempt a rescue. You're too emotional, too attached to outdated concepts like love and loyalty. So we've accelerated the timeline. He gestured, and another guard produced a vial of silver liquid. This is essence of wolfsbane, distilled with cold iron and dark magic. 1 drop will sever the blood oath permanently. 2 drops will kill. Sadhbh made a sound of pure anguish. Here's your choice, Cathal continued. You can force her to drink it. Watch the bond break. Watch her die. And your son goes free, alive and unharmed. The council will even allow him to remain in your care, though he'll be monitored. He paused. Or you can refuse. And I slit the boy's throat right now while you watch. Then we execute you both anyway. No. Sadhbh's voice cut through the silence. No, Cináed, don't you dare. The prisoner doesn't get a vote, Mirianne said coldly. She'd appeared from another shadow, because of course she had. Of course they'd all been waiting. Cináed looked at his son, unconscious, vulnerable, 5 years old and already used as a weapon. Then at Sadhbh, his mate, his heart chained and broken but still fighting. The blood oath pulsed between them, a living thing screaming denial. There has to be another way, he said, his voice cracking. There isn't. Cathal held out the vial. Choose. Now. Time slowed. Cináed's mind raced through every possibility, every scenario, every desperate plan. He could shift, try to reach Ronan before the blade fell. Odds of success. Maybe 20%. He could attack Cathal, hoping the confusion would allow them to escape. Odds of success. Less than 5%. He could surrender completely, throw himself on the council's mercy. Since they had mercy 0. Every path led to death. Every choice ended in loss. Cináed. Sadhbh's voice was steady now, calm. Look at me. He did. Those golden eyes held his, fierce and bright and full of something that looked like peace. "I've had 3 months to think," she said. 3 months in this cell, feeling your anguish through the bond. Knowing what this was costing you. Knowing what it was doing to our son." She smiled, sad and beautiful. "I've been so selfish. Holding on because I couldn't bear to let go. But watching you destroy yourself trying to save me. That's worse than death." "Don't," Cináed whispered. "Sadhbh, don't. He needs you alive," she continued. "Our son needs his father. The kingdom needs its king. And I." Her voice broke. "I need to know you'll take care of him. Teach him about his magic. Help him understand he's not a monster. Love him enough for both of us. I can't lose you. You're not losing me." She pressed her hand to her heart. "The blood oath isn't just magic, Cináed. It's truth. It's the recognition that we were always meant to find each other. And that truth doesn't die just because my body does." "That's very touching," Cathal interrupted. "But we're on a schedule. Decide. Or the boy dies." The blade pressed harder against Ronan's throat. A thin line of blood appeared. Cináed felt something inside him shatter. Not his heart, that had broken months ago. This was something deeper. His soul, maybe. His hope. His belief that somehow, someway the good guys won, and love conquered all and sacrifice meant something. He reached for the vial. Sadhbh's eyes never left his as he approached her cell. The guard unlocked it. They weren't afraid of her now, not with Ronan's life on the line, and Cináed stepped inside. This close, he could see every bruise, every mark of torture. Could smell the blood and pain and fear. Could feel the bond between them blazing like a star. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Don't be." She lifted her chin. "I chose you 3 years ago in those woods. Choose you again. Every time. Even knowing how it ends." He uncorked the vial. The smell was acrid, wrong, tasting of death and endings. His hands were shaking so badly that he almost dropped it. "Wait." Líadan's voice rang out. Everyone turned. The queen stood in the entrance to the dungeons, still dressed in her nightgown, her hair loose and wild. But her eyes were cold as winter, and in her hand she held something that made every wolf in the room freeze. The Seeing Stone. An artifact from before the Purge, one of the few remaining relics that could show truth through illusion, reveal lies beneath oaths, and expose corruption hidden by power. It had been locked in the royal vault for 200 years. Líadan had stolen it. "Before anyone dies tonight," she said calmly, "I think the kingdom deserves to know the truth. Don't you, High Counselor?" Cathal's face went white. "You have no authority to use that. I'm the queen. I have every authority." She held the stone up, and it began to glow. "Let's start with an easy question. Why were the Banished Lines really purged? This is inappropriate. Show us." Líadan's voice was a command, backed by royal power and pure rage. "Show us the truth." The Seeing Stone flared bright. And suddenly the dungeon was filled with images, memories, truth bleeding out like light through cracks. The purge hadn't been about protecting the kingdom from dangerous magic. It had been about power. The council, or rather, the wolves who'd founded the council 2 centuries ago, had discovered that the Banished Lines carried a genetic marker that made them immune to alpha command. Immune to dominance. Immune to control. In a world built on hierarchy and submission, that was unforgivable. So they'd engineered a crisis. Manufactured evidence of corruption. Convinced the kingdoms that the Banished Lines were monsters who needed to be eliminated. And they'd slaughtered thousands, all to maintain their grip on power. The current council knew. Course they knew. They'd inherited the lie and perpetuated it, because admitting the truth would mean losing everything. The images faded. Silence filled the dungeon. Every guard, every council member, every witness stood frozen. Because the Seeing Stone couldn't lie. Its truth was absolute, unquestionable, carved into reality itself. "You murdered thousands," Líadan said softly. "For politics. It was necessary, Cathal started. It was genocide. Her voice cut like a blade. And you've been covering it up for 200 years. Making wolves like Sadhbh into criminals for the crime of existing. Threatening children like Ronan for carrying magic that should have been celebrated. She turned to face the guards. You all saw. You all know now. The question is, what will you do about it? For a long moment no one moved. Then one guard, young, barely past his first shift, lowered his weapon. I didn't sign up to be part of a genocide. Another guard stepped back from Ronan, pulling the blade away from his throat. Stand down, Cathal snarled. That's an order. From a lying, murdering traitor. The first guard's voice was steady. I don't think so. It happened fast after that. More guards stood down. Some even turned on the council members, weapons raised. Cathal and Miriam tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. They were surrounded by wolves who just learned their entire lives had been built on lies. Cináed barely noticed. He was focused on his son, scooping Ronan into his arms, checking for injuries. The boy stirred, eyes fluttering open. Papa! His voice was small, confused. What happened? You're safe. Cináed's voice broke. You're safe now. He carried Ronan to Sadhbh's cell. One of the guards had already removed her chains, and she collapsed the moment she was free. Cináed caught her with one arm, holding both his mate and his son, the three of them finally together after 3 months of hell. Sadhbh was crying. Ronan was crying. Cináed was pretty sure he was crying too, but he couldn't tell anymore. Couldn't tell where his pain ended and theirs began, couldn't separate his relief from their trauma. The blood oath blazed between him and Sadhbh, bright and fierce and unbroken. I thought I'd lost you, she whispered against his throat. Never. He pressed his forehead to hers. I will burn down kingdoms before I lose you again. That might not be necessary, Líadan said. She'd moved closer, the seeing stone still glowing in her hands. The noble houses saw everything through their connection to the guards. By dawn, every wolf in the kingdom will know the truth. The council's authority is broken. They'll fight back, Sadhbh said quietly. They have too much to lose. Let them try. Líadan's smile was sharp. They're outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and exposed. This is over. But nothing was ever really over. 3 days later, Cináed stood in the throne room addressing his kingdom. Sadhbh sat beside him, not behind, not hidden, but right there in plain sight. Ronan was on his other side, the golden glow still sometimes flickering in his eyes. Líadan stood with them too. She'd refused a quiet annulment, insisted on remaining queen. Someone needs to help you rebuild, she'd said. Besides, I have nowhere else to go. The kingdom was in chaos. Half the noble houses supported the revelation and demanded council reform. The other half claimed the seeing stone had been tampered with, that this was all a plot to seize absolute power. Civil war was brewing. Cináed didn't care. He'd spent 3 months being forced to choose between love and duty, between his mate and his son, between his heart and his crown. He'd been backed into corners and given impossible ultimatums and made to feel like a coward for wanting to save the people he loved. He was done compromising. The Council of the Old Order is dissolved, he announced. Cathal, Miriam, and the others will stand trial for genocide. The pact law will be rewritten to recognize bonds of love rather than political convenience. And the Banished Lines, he took Sadhbh's hand, are banished no more. The throne room erupted. Cheers from some. Protests from others. Chaos and celebration and fury all mixed together. Ronan tugged on his sleeve. Papa, what happens now? It was a good question. What happened when you tore down a system that had existed for 200 years? When you challenged power structures built on lies and maintained through fear? When you chose love over law and made that choice in front of an entire kingdom? Cináed didn't know. But he looked at Sadhbh, alive, free, holding his hand like she'd never let go, and at Ronan, safe, healing, starting to smile again, and at Líadan, damaged, fierce, ready to fight for a better world. And he thought maybe, just maybe, the answer didn't matter. Because some things were worth fighting for, even if the fight never ended. Some loves were worth dying for, even if death wasn't required. Some truths were worth speaking, even if they shattered everything. The blood oath on his wrist pulsed, warm and alive. Sadhbh squeezed his hand. Ronan's eyes flashed gold. And somewhere in the shadows beyond the throne room, a figure watched, waiting. Because the council might have fallen, but the power they'd been protecting the kingdom from, the ancient magic, the old gods, the forces that had been sleeping for 2 centuries, was starting to wake. And Ronan, with his forbidden bloodline and impossible power, was the key to either saving the world or ending it. The portrait of Cináed's new family lay shattered in the royal archives, never to be displayed. But the real family, messy, damaged, forged in fire and blood and impossible choices, stood together in the throne room, ready for whatever came next, even if what came next destroyed them all.